The rain had just started to fall, soft and steady, as Daniel Parker drove home from work. He was exhausted, the kind of tired that settled deep into his bones. Another long shift at the factory, another day of barely making ends meet. His mind was cluttered with worries, bills piling up, his aging truck barely running, and his daughter's upcoming birthday, which he had no idea how to afford. Then, through the dim glow of his headlights, he spotted an old, beat-up car on the side of the road. Steam billowed from the hood, and beside it stood an elderly man, drenched and shivering. The man's posture was tired, his hands rough and scarred, signs of a hard life. Something about him pulled at Daniel's heart. Maybe it was the way he stared at the engine, helpless yet resigned, as if he was used to being overlooked. Daniel pulled over. He hesitated for a second, he was late, and his own problems weighed heavy, but then he stepped out. "Need some help, sir?" he asked. The old man turned, his tired eyes lighting up with the smallest spark of hope. "I'd appreciate it, son," he said. "Name's Walter. I was just trying to get home before the storm hit, but I guess the car had other plans." Daniel rolled up his sleeves and got to work. It wasn't an easy fix, the engine was old, parts were rusted, and Walter had barely any tools, but Daniel refused to leave the man stranded. He worked under the rain, his hands freezing, until finally, after nearly an hour, the engine roared back to life. Walter watched in quiet awe. "You didn't have to do all that," he said. Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans. "I know. But I couldn't just leave you here." Walter smiled, a slow, knowing kind of smile. "Not many people stop for an old soldier anymore," he murmured. Daniel glanced at him. "You're a veteran?" Walter nodded. "Vietnam. Been through my fair share of storms, but folks don't really see us anymore. Just a bunch of forgotten men with broken cars." Daniel swallowed hard. He had never served, but he had always respected those who had. His own father had been a veteran, too. He had passed away when Daniel was just a teenager, leaving behind more memories than explanations. Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "For your trouble," he said. Daniel shook his head. "No way. Just glad I could help." Walter stared at him for a long moment before finally nodding. "Good man," he said quietly. "Not many like you left." Then, with a final nod of gratitude, Walter climbed into his car and drove off, disappearing into the night. The mysterious gift. The next morning, Daniel stepped outside to get the mail, and froze. Sitting on his porch was a small wooden box. It was old but carefully polished, its lid carved with intricate designs. There was no note, no explanation. Just a box. Heart pounding with curiosity, he picked it up and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly folded, was a faded American flag, the edges worn but well kept. Beneath it lay a handful of medals, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and others Daniel didn't recognize. And at the very bottom, a note written in careful, shaky handwriting. "For the man who still remembers. Some things are worth more than money." Daniel's throat tightened. He ran his fingers over the flag, feeling the weight of its history, of the sacrifices behind it. He knew, without a doubt, who had left it. Walter. He had given Daniel something priceless, something that carried stories of courage, pain, and resilience. Tears stung Daniel's eyes as he clutched the box to his chest. He had helped a stranger with a broken car, but Walter had given him something far greater, a reminder that kindness mattered, that small actions carried weight, and that no one, no matter how forgotten, should ever be left behind. That day, Daniel made a promise to himself. He would tell this story. He would pass it on. Because some gifts were too important to keep to yourself.